So welcome to January's PHP Vegas meetup. We excited to have two awesome talks this go around. Devin is going to be speaking about Livewire, which is a really interesting. Would you call it a front end framework, Devin, for
Uh,
Laravel? Um,
it, kind of, yeah. It's definitely a backend framework that allows you to manage the state on the front end.
okay, so it looks, I'm not the greatest front end developer, so I definitely wanted to understand Livewire better. So I'm excited to hear about that. We also, I'll be speaking about EasyEngine. I did a talk a few months ago at the WordPress meetup, uh, and essentially I wanted to give that talk here since it's a very technical talk, and I think it really a lot of devs were in that meetup. So I wanted to definitely get it in front of the user group here. Um, I've got some kind of open source repos and stuff that kind of go along with it that I want to explain how it works. So we'll be kind of covering how to set up EasyEngine in Google Cloud Compute with a few simple scripts, and basically how EasyEngine works and how you can use it to quickly spin up, multiple WordPress sites and all that good stuff. So let's go ahead and kick things off. Just a couple of shout outs before we get started. Um, Thanks to Tech Systems for sponsoring us. If you guys are looking for, or gals are looking for a job, they have a ton of openings. So definitely reach out to Jessica. Her information is on our meetup page. Um, we still probably won't be meeting in person for a while, but I'm sure once things do start to calm down, Innovation Center will probably. So just shout out to them. And at the end of the talks here, we'll be giving away two prizes. We'll be giving away a 1-year PHP Storm license from our wonderful sponsors at JetBrains. They provide awesome IDEs and continue to be a leader in that development space. So we're excited to give that out, as well as a 1-month subscription to SymphonyCast, which has expanded their whole kind of video archive of tutorials to not only include Symfony, but front end frameworks like Vue, React, and a lot of other development related stuff. So that 1 month will give you unlimited access to all of their videos and all of the tutorials that they have there. So definitely excited to raffle that out as well. So stay tuned for that. We'll give that away here at the end. And then I guess without further ado, let's kick it off to Devin here. And we'll be recording Meetup. If you do happen to miss it or you want a friend to check it out, subscribe to our YouTube, and I'll be posting it there.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh.
Yep.
All right, everyone. Let me go ahead and get this started for us. Sorry, one moment. All right, so you should go ahead and see a screen on that now. You should go ahead and see Livewire.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Perfect. Awesome. Thank you very much for confirming that. So hi everyone. Thank you for coming today. Happy New Year. Let's do what we can to make this a great year. So Livewire. So Livewire is essentially it's a front end framework that allows Laravel that making building dynamic front ends as simple as writing vanilla PHP. So that's a lot of stuff right there. That's a mouthful, a lot of marketing terms. But essentially, what Livewire allows us to do is use PHP on the back end, and it automatically wires up our front end to our back end for us and allows us to manage and move forward and create some really nice interactive type of websites without having to mess around with JavaScript. So a little bit about me. My name is Devin. I'm a development architect and technical administrator for a company called Nationwide Power. I've been doing web development primarily with Laravel and Vue.js for the last 4 years or so. So that's probably everyone who, I guess, technically I'm classified as a full stack developer. So, I do PHP on the back end, hence our PHP user group. And on the front end, I work with JavaScript, and the framework that I've been using is Vue.js. So there's a lot of other, JavaScripts out there from, React, Svelte, Alpine's kind of new. Some of them are a little not as full-blown full stack frameworks, and some of them are just are little sprinkles as well. So one of the reasons why I was so interested in Livewire was, I've just been realizing that JavaScript is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's pretty crazy of how much complexity in code, and almost in a sense some type of duplication that we have, that we bring into our projects, just for some simple things like some modals or loading spinners. I'm pretty sure that everyone, well, at least anyone who works with the front end, they understand that there's the build process to build all the assets. And, anytime that you install anything with NPM, you have thousands and thousands of packages that, go along with that. Some of them you don't even know about. Well, actually, probably a lot of the packages out there, you have no clue about them. And we're trusting a lot of these authors out there to be good. And for me, while I necessarily don't mind, some of the additional complexity of Vue.js and having to compile that, I do see that there's a lot more time and effort, being put into that. And at the same time, if you have time to learn something, and your time is being split up from learning front end stuff versus back end stuff, whereas if you can just learn the back end stuff and kind of just roll with that, then you can spend a lot more time focusing on the back end and learning on the back end, and really mastering that skill. And so that's all of that. And I did wanted to bring up the whole npm packages with all of the thousands of packages out there. I'm not sure if everyone's probably heard of this by now, but the whole SolarWinds hack with the whole supply chain was really the vulnerability of that hack and what caused that hack to be successful. And that's a concern that I have as well with, all of the JavaScript packages. There were, core-js. Just last month, there was a known vulnerability found in it. So, there's just a lot more code that we add, just to have a cohesive and flashy and potentially smooth front end. So with that, let's go straight into a Vue component example. So this right here is an example of a Vue component that we have. This is a single page Vue component, and we can see that, oops, sorry about that. We can see kind of towards the top up here, we have our templating, and then the second section down below is going to be our scripting. So technically these are all in the same file, but they could be broken out into templating right up from the top, and then down to into the scripting language can be its own. So kind of the way that this goes ahead and works, the templating goes ahead and renders out this HTML, and then inside of HTML, Vue understands that on the @click. So anytime that there's a click, it will go ahead and execute this method. Let's come down here and we'll increment or decrement the count, and then the count itself is just outputted right here for us. So an example of the same type of count component in Livewire is this is what it's going to look like. So anytime that you go ahead and create a Livewire component, there's going to be two files that are going to be generated. You're going to have your under the app HTTP Livewire. Inside of there, you're going to have what's going to be more. You're going to have a class in here, and this extends a Livewire component. But if you can think of this as kind of just being more of like your standard controller that you would have, like in a Laravel instance. So, from here, you can go ahead and you can, sorry, one moment. You can just put it down right there. Thank you. Sorry about that, guys. Thanks. So then we can see in here that we have, a couple of properties that we can set, and then we have some methods inside of the actual class. And what's really important is this render method right here. So this render method actually needs to return a blade view. And that part is kind of key. So in a sense, you can kind of think of all of this right here as that scripting section inside of like the view component. And then on our HTML templating side of things, this is the other file of our component that lives in resources, views, Livewire, and then our counter blade, and all that this does is just renders our HTML for us. So same, if we were to execute this on a web page, we would have the same exact result for that. So all Livewire components must have a single root element. That is extremely important, because if you don't, it's not going to work. So there are two essential things that we need to understand about Livewire and the public properties inside of Livewire. So the way that Livewire works is this component that we have in here, all of this logic, is going to get serialized. And when it comes out to the request to the server, it goes ahead and gets serialized, goes onto the front end, and then the front end itself has all of that serialized data with us. And then from that, we're able to use all of the Livewire goodness. So technically, Livewire actually has a lot of JavaScript built into it to make everything work for us. We just don't have to write any of that JavaScript. We just write PHP. But these public properties are passed back and forth through every single request. So this is visible, and it's very important to understand that you should not store any type of sensitive data inside of here, because they go back and forth with every single request. And on top of that, the properties can only be a string, an integer, an array, a Boolean, or a stringable, a collection, a date time, or an elegant collection. So those are the only type of values that a public property is allowed to have. So let's talk about how it works a little bit. This is a little recap it. For view, on the view side of things, we go ahead and we hear a click, and then on the click, we call an increment, and the increment function inside of the actual front end itself. So all of this stays within the web browser. There are no network requests or anything like that. So this is extremely fast. However, one of the big differences is that with Vue uses a virtual DOM. So when it goes ahead and updates the count, it has to go ahead and re-render that virtual DOM for itself. So the browser is managing its own DOM, and then on top of that, it has a virtual DOM that it has to go ahead and manage. So some pros and cons to that. Whereas on the Livewire component, Livewire goes ahead and hears the click on the increment, and then it sends an AJAX request to the server via to the PHP server or application server. And then when it comes in, a part of the request, it deserializes the data that was on the front end, that it passed to the front end to actually view the component, comes back in, deserializes it, and then hydrates that same component back with all of that information that was passed back. So that's how you can more or less have state that gets transferred back and forth for moving forward. And then PHP goes ahead and calls the increment method on the class, which updates the count. And then Laravel goes ahead and re-renders the blade component and then sends back that HTML to Livewire. Now, Livewire will go ahead and find the DOM element that's on the web browser and will swap it out. Livewire does not use a virtual DOM. It uses pure DOM, so it's extremely fast. So we don't have to worry about maybe some of these overhead that you would have with like a virtual DOM and potentially like a lot of data, like say an extremely big data table. Whenever you have a lot of data on the front end like that, you could potentially run into some performance issues. So installing Livewire is very simple. Once you have a Livewire, at this point in time, is a framework for Laravel. So Laravel is a requirement in order for Livewire. after you have Laravel installed, you just do your basic composer require. And then after that, we can go ahead and just add 2 assets inside of your template for your layout. And then after that, Livewire is installed and ready for your use. To go ahead and to make a component, go ahead and create a PHP artisan make Livewire and then the component name. When we do this, we have 2 new files that were created that we went over earlier. And we do have the option of moving these components to a subfolder via some of these methods as well, if you'd like to have them, a little bit more organized for you. Now, here is an example of how we would render a Livewire component inside of a Blade template for us. So we can just go ahead and say that, this is just we're going to show a particular post on this one. So we can say that this is actually going to, application /post/1, for example, right? And then when we do that, it will go ahead and it could, you can do some route model binding, or somehow you go ahead and get that data, and then you pass that data into as a prop into this Livewire component. And so here are 2 examples of how you can use the components. This is the one on the left is a little bit more of the newer syntax that they have on Laravel. This is started with Laravel 7 and higher. And then this Livewire derivative is something that has been around for a very long time that you can use. And if you need to reference a particular Livewire component that's in the subfolder, you do it with dot notation here for you. One of the nice things, in my opinion, that I like about Livewire is they understand full page components, which means that you can pass the component directly to the Laravel route as if it was the controller, rather than having to pass it to a controller to pass it to a Blade, and then inside that Blade template reference the actual Laravel component. So that's a pretty nice little feature. There is a little gotcha, though, that you do have. It does look for a default layout in here for you. So under Resources, Views, Layouts, App, it will look for a file, and it needs to have this slot in here for you, and then it will go ahead and render any of the data that you passed into that full page component inside of the slot here. And if you want to, you can technically, when you're returning the view for this, you can go ahead and override the actual path if you're not using this path directly. That's just the default one. And so we were talking about route model binding, and so route model binding is when you go ahead and you go to a route on the URL, right? There's going to be some type of identifier that's inside of that URL that Laravel will be able to identify as a particular type of resource, and then when you type in that resource, it will automatically hydrate it for you. Thus, route model binding. So when we go ahead and when we get the post, and when we have the post inside of here, let's just say it's 1, right? I'll go over the lifestyle hooks in a moment, but one of the lifestyle hooks is mount. So when you're mounting it, you can go ahead and using dependency injection, we'll pull out a post with the post that we're looking for, and then we can go ahead and set it inside of this post. So all of this setup right here is technically required if you're using 7.3 and below. 7.3 and below. With the new feature of, I'm slipping on the name, so please forgive me, but on PHP 7.4, with the constructor, how the constructor can instantiate new properties for you and assign them at the same time. That type of functionality is how you can, with 7.4, remove these 3 lines of code and have the same type of outcome. Okay. So now we're going to talk about some initializations and properties. So, anytime that we have a property inside of here, more than likely, if we have a property, we need to associate some type of data to it. So here's an example for us. So with inside of the mount, we can just manually go ahead and set this name to Devin, or we can go ahead and use the fill option, inside of here. I like this option as, so anytime that you need to reset the public values, so whatever their initial state was, just be aware that there's this this reset for you, and it will go ahead and reset it. Some data binding. So this is when stuff starts getting fun, when we start having the back end interacting directly with the front end. And so here's an example of a component that's called my name is. We go ahead and have a property, public property of name. Now we have this render method, which we know it's a blade template. And then we can go ahead and render this blade template inside of here. And in this blade template, we have just a basic input that is a text type. And so now we can go ahead and see this derivative wire model. So wire model is Livewire was heavily inspired by Vue.js. So as you start seeing, there's a lot of similarities where you would see V, V dash. More than likely, it's going to be wire colon for that same type of option that you're going to look for. So now that within the wire model here, we're going to associate this input, or we're binding this input into using this property value, which we have over here. And then we just go ahead and echo out my name is, whatever that might be. So if we were to go ahead and inside this input, whatever we typed in here, every time that we typed, by default, at the time of typing, Livewire will send an AJAX request, come back here, update this, send it back. So it does do an AJAX request. So if after every single change on the input by default. So if you were to type in Devin, Devin, right, you would technically have 5 AJAX requests that would go back. So the first one would set the public name to D, second one DE, and so forth. So fundamentally, that is how Livewire works, and but we have the option of customizing that to fit our needs. A wire model can actually be added to any type of input that dispatches an input event. So this also means custom elements and third-party libraries too. That's pretty cool. Here's an example of wiring some nested data. We just use some dot notation on that. And so we were talking about going ahead, and every time that you type something in, it sends an AJAX request. So I think by default the default is 150 milliseconds debounce. So we have the ability of setting this debounce to whatever we would like, or we have the option of doing lazy updating it, which means that it won't be an AJAX request will not be sent. I'm sorry, an AJAX request will only be sent once the focus is lost from that input element on the page. Or if we want to, we can just go ahead and do a deferred update, which is one of the newer features of Livewire version 2. And so what that does is, sounds like what it is. It kind of puts all of these changes that it needs to send back to the application server in a queue or in a bucket. And whenever the next network request goes, it just grabs everything inside of that network request and sends it off. So that's a nice way to get some of the niceties and being able to leverage Livewire without having to, essentially DDoS yourself, because that is a problem, or a potential problem if the application is not configured properly. We have the option to bind directly to the model properties. So when we go ahead, so here's an example using PHP 7.4 of using we're going to have a post form component. So inside of here, we have just your basic post. So we're instantiating a new post model for us. And inside of there, we have a rules property and then save. As you can see that there's, and technically this is a fully functioning component, and there's a lot of magic going on in here that if you're not aware of, can seem, well, a little unknowing And so you just have to be aware of that magic, and just so that way you don't, potentially overlook something, because, what's happening inside of here is, with that new constructor feature inside of 7.4, it's automatically binding that new post inside of here for us. And when we go ahead and hit on validate, the validate method is actually under the component, and then on the component it looks for any type of rules that are set, so we can go ahead and set our validation rules inside of here for us. And here is the HTML output that we would, well, here's the HTML that we would need in order to have to wire up that component for us. Computer properties are a thing, kind of like how you have computer properties inside of Vue.js. One of the differences, though, is that computer properties are only initiated on the initial instantiation of the class. So, and that's kind of a big difference between like Vue.js, which means is that on a computer property it can only be set when you start the class. Whereas on the computed property on like Vue.js per se, that can be dynamic and can change at any point in time for us. So this is a nice little feature for us if you'd like to leverage it. Our actions that we have, so the actions are how we can interact with the front end with the back end for us. So our default actions that we have within Livewire are your click, your key down, and on your submits. So then on your key down, you have all your key modifiers. So if you want to listen to a particular type of key, you can definitely do that. When we go ahead and so instead of on the wire clicking for us, we can actually pass parameters inside of our to our method on the front end directly for us without having to pass that in some other way. So this is just another option for you. So if you wanted to, if you had the public properties, somewhere else with this information, you can get that passed along. Moving on to event modifiers, your common ones that you have are stop, prevent, self, and debounce that we went over. And some special triggers that we have are set, toggle, refresh, emit, and event. So set's really cool because set allows you to dictate the value of set the value of a public property on the class without having to wire model it per se. So so as we can see here, when we click on this, on this button, the public property of messages, we're going to set it to hello and to say hi, rather than having to have an input and then bind that input to the input value and then say set it type of thing. So just some little ways of doing it. Toggling is nice for Boolean values. Refreshes it. Emit is fun because it allows you to emit something on the global bus. So that allows you to go into firing events, which leads us into firing events. I have a typo. So there's three ways of firing events. The method A would be from the template itself. So this is on the front end. So on the wire click, we're going to emit an event, and this event we're just going to call show modal, for example. So this method is twice as fast as method B, and this is the preferred method. The other option is actually emitting it from the component. So that's on more of that controller class. So that would be if you had a click event that called a method on the controller class, and then on that controller itself, it submitted this emit event in here. And then when it submits the emit event, it sends the request back out to the front end. The front end will go ahead and set that to the global bus, and then send that out. And then on the JavaScript, and anything listening on that bus will be able to pick it up. Or if we want to initiate an event from the global JavaScript, here's an example of how we would do this. So this is helpful if you're going to be, integrating other third parties tools that you might have. So now that we're good at firing events, now we need to start listening to events. So when we go ahead and have this listener here for us. So we have this public property of false. Sorry, is open, is set to false. And then after that, we're going to dictate that when for this component itself, we're going to have a listener, and that listener is going to listen to this event. And when it listens to this event, fire this method. So that's how we can get the listening to methods for components for us. Moving on to Lifecycle class hooks. Sorry.
I have a quick question about the events. So are those events on the front end as well as the back end? Because I guess you're using modal in this example. So is that like a JavaScript event, or is that like an event that actually goes through perhaps, I mean, it must go through Laravel too for this to catch it, right?
Yeah. All of the above, or you said two options, and technically it's both options.
Okay.
So it just depends on where we're firing and where we want to listen, essentially.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
So I could fire it from the JavaScript side, and that will still catch on the backend side, or
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, because on the JavaScript side, this should actually be method C instead of method B. So that's a typo that I have. But on this method from here, when you actually call Livewire emit show model, it actually sends an AJAX request to the server at that point in time.
Gotcha.
Into Livewire, and then Livewire understands how to process that.
Cool.
So you can have, so you can call a component within a component inside of a component for Livewire. Like, that's not confusing enough.
Yeah.
You definitely can have some inception inside of there. So, any other questions on that? Okay. So lifecycle classes. So the classes are important to understand, because that's how we can hook into the actual component itself, and we can override some of some type of functionality, or set something that we want inside of there that business logic wise that we need to go ahead and have. So we have mounting, which happens immediately after the component is instantiated but before it's rendered, right? And then we have hydrate, which is on every single request after the component is hydrated but before any action is performed, or the render is called, right? Dehydrate, updating before it's updated, and updated is after it's updated. So, and all of these hooks that we have are available for the property and the nested property. So you can override. So say if you have on a form, you have a public property for first name and a public property for last name, and you always want to make sure that it's camel cased, or something along the lines of that. So when you can say on the form for updating first name, set that as a method, and then whenever that property is being updated, it will always call that method for you and then perform any action that you set inside that method. So here's a form for us, and this right here is going to be an example. Ooh, that's not formatted. Nice. Sorry about the formatting on the right side. This is an example of how we can do some input validation for us inside of a contact form. So we'll go ahead and create a new Livewire component called contact form. We live inside of the component. Here's all of our logic. We have a public name, some rules that we want, and then we have a submit method. We're going to validate it, and then if it validates, then we're going to create the contact for us. On our form, we're going to prevent this to be submitted, but by the default action on the browser, and we're going to override it to when we do want to submit it to execute our submit method on side of there for when the form is submitted. And then on this input, we have an input. We have a wire model to the name, which is going to anything that we type inside of there will go ahead and be set to this public property for us. And then this is a blade directive. For error, we're going to see if there's any anything in the message bag with the name, and if there is that, let's just spit that out here for us. And then when we're ready to save the contacts, we just go ahead and click on submit, and it's going to submit the form for us. So we would go ahead and the way that this would work out is as we type in the name of our contact, every key up that we have, it would send an AJAX request to update this public property for us. And it only sets that public property. So when we are ready to save the contacts, that's when we actually submit it. And then upon submissions, we'll do the validation. So, if it's three characters, we require a minimum of 6. It's going to fail validation. The validation is going to have in the message bag, it's going to have a variable for the name. And then that way we can go ahead and see the error inside of here, which is going to be a validation link there. And then if it was anything after 6, the 6 characters or greater, we'd say, yep, cool. We passed validation. We're good on that. And then let's just go ahead and create this contact for us. So this is input validation. And now this is pretty much the same exact thing. The only difference is that this is going to be real-time validation versus only validating it when it's being submitted. So similar setup, we have a contact form, public property, we have our rules, but the one thing that we have is we have this Lifecycle hook that we're going to leverage on updated. So same thing as we start typing in. So the only difference now is that as we start typing in into this input and we bind it to the actual name property, as we're doing that, since we're leveraging this Lifecycle hook, we're going to go ahead and get the property name, which is name, and then we're going to only validate this property. And validate only allows us to execute just a single rule for whatever the property name is. So in this example, it doesn't necessarily make it totally clear, but if you could imagine that we had a public property for name, and then one for address, and then one for telephone number, for example, on the input one, let's just say on the first input, we're only typing into name. It's only going to do the validation on the name. It's not going to do any of the validations on any of the other inputs that we're not typing in at the moment. So that's how we can get some real-time validation for us without causing too much problems. Another option we have is redirecting once we're happy with everything. So so go ahead and have this component. We have the public property on the component, and then we have a method add contacts, which we go ahead and just create a new contact with the email address, which was set. And then after that, we're going to redirect to a success form. And then here's our Blade template that we're going to output. Within our output on here, we have an input, wire model lazy. So the differences on the lazy is that it's actually not going to send any type of network requests until the focus is gone from the input. Check to see if there's any errors, and then we have the same add contact option. Here's an example of how we would do some type of CSS transitions. So we have just a standard div, Blade derivative of if, and then some type of conditional. And then if it's true, then we can see div, wire, transition, fade. There's some other ones. They're slipping my mind. I generally only use fade. And then after that, we have the end if. So Livewire has a lot of other features that we didn't go over today, like nested components, testing, file upload, file download. They have built-in file uploads and file downloads. It's amazing. It works great. It's really nice comparing having to doing it manually without any type of library that we have, without using a library like Axios or something. Authorization, polling, prefetching, and then some other integrations like with Alpine, Laravel Echo, and inline scripts. So this is my Livewire talk, and so one of the things is this is my second time performing a Livewire talk. The last one that I gave was back in June of 2019 when Livewire was still in beta, and one of the cool things I think about it's been a year and a half, and I didn't have to change any slides. I just had to add slides. So that part is really nice because it's been about a year and a half, almost 2 years now, of Livewire. It was developed by a gentleman named Caleb Porzio, who was inspired by the programming language called Elixir, and there is a program called Phoenix LiveView, which allows you to kind of have some of the same functionality as Livewire within Elixir for you. So he was super inspired, and Caleb has a mindset of embracing the backend, so kind of doing as much as possible inside of the backend, and then just presenting up things to yourself inside of Live and on the front end. So I enjoy Livewire. I don't use it in production. I've built, one or two, fun little things in there just for me to learn it, and just to kind of see what else is going on out there in the ecosystem. There's claims that this is out on production, so it is a production ready product for you guys to use. So that is like I said, that was my presentation that I have for you on Livewire, and then I have some code if you would like to kind of go over that as well, and I can show you this other little project that I'm working on if you'd like that.
Yeah, sounds good. Let me take a look. Can you go back one slide real quick? I just had a quick question. Yeah, so Alpine.js.
Oops, sorry about that.
That's a cute dog.
Oh, sorry sorry.
Is that your dog?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great shot, dude. You got it at the perfect time.
Yeah, she has a Joker smile. So yeah. Yeah, we love it.
Alpine.js, that's that's like a CSS thing with JS, or what exactly? I think I've heard of that, and I think Echo you've explained to me before, but can you just explain some of those JS integrations?
Yeah, absolutely. So Livewire can integrate with any type of JavaScript application, which is great because it allows you to use what already is out there inside the ecosystem. Alpine.js was JavaScript. I don't know if you'd call it a framework. It's more like Svelte than it's going to be like Vue and React type of thing. So it allows you to have just to drop like little JavaScript niceties and things that you might have to do frequently on there for you. But it can be used as a front-end framework as well. I know that was a little confusing, but are you familiar with Svelte at all, or have you heard of Svelte?
No, that's a new
one. Okay. It's just I view it. Let me see if I can.
I'm still a JavaScript noob.
See what Alpine.js says, because I'm sure that they can do a lot better job than I can. So yeah, so it's a reactive and declarative nature of big frameworks like Vue and React. So I've leveraged this. So here's an example of like a drop-down or modal inside of. Make it a little bigger for you. Right, so we set some. So essentially, what we're doing is Xdata is kind of like the store or the store sense for Alpine.js. So we're creating a brand new store with Xdata. So anything that's inside of this div inside of here has access to any of this data that's inside of here, which means that this open is actually the open inside of here. So we're going to say, click. So when we're doing clicking, we're going to say, hey, this open, set this value to be true. And then obviously this is open dropdown. And then now we're doing an X show, right? So then now we're going to, because by default, The X show just sets the hidden value or not, if it's hidden, or sorry, display of none versus display of block. That's all that X show does. And then when you do that, it's going to be, so only show this when this open is set to true. And then when you click away, from it, right, set it to false. So that's just it's another type of JavaScript that allows you, another type of JavaScript framework that it's super small, super light. And the nice thing about this is this functionality you have, you get all of that just by including the JavaScript file from the CDN. Like, you can build this directly in HTML. You don't have to have a build process, no Webpack, no nothing like that. It just works with the DOM. No virtual DOM. Yeah, it's nice. So the other thing that you're questioning though is that was Tailwind. That's that front end CSS framework, CSS framework that we have. So, all right. Well, I have this little app that I built a while ago. I'm going to share it if you guys want to go to it. I have an ingrok inside of here to this, if you guys would like. So I built this little trivia game out of Livewire. This is on version 1. If you guys want to play, you don't have to. If you don't, you don't have to. But this is what I was going to show you from the technical perspective. So anyone want to join? No? Okay. So let me go ahead and I'm going to sign up. Oops.
How do you sign up?
I'm sorry. I sent a link inside of the chat on ingrok.
Okay.
If you just got to register. If you click on register, and then if you guys just want to create an account real quick, then I'll send a link out. All right. So this here is a web app that I have built because I wanted to go ahead and I wanted to learn about this. So it looks like we have John, we have Josh. Okay, so cool. So other people are. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to host a game. So the description is going to be PHP Vegas demo. I'm going to say that I'm going to have.
Seeing a black screen right now. My computer's kind of. I tried putting on my headphones and that freaked out my computer.
Uh-oh.
Anybody else seeing his screen? Is it just me?
Yeah, I can get to the game on my phone.
Oh.
No. His screen share.
Oh yeah, I'm seeing it.
Okay, yeah, it's just me.
Jump out of
go
Jitsi,
ahead.
jump back in.
I'm recording right now, so yeah.
Do you want to open up another browser then?
What's the game ID?
Yeah.
Do we have one yet?
No, I'm just gonna build one real quick. So essentially, this is a trivia app that I kind of started building out, and so kind of the idea was I was gonna have you guys just go along and play with me. So the idea was that this is gonna be kind of like bar trivia in a sense, right? Where you can have a couple of questions, you can get your friends together, and then one person's the host, and a lot of other people are answering the questions for you. So let me go ahead and just create this game. So let me share this. I'll put that. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. Totally typed it in wrong. All right. You guys wouldn't mind just going to that URL after you created your account? I see that you guys, a couple people are going there. Cool. So we can see right here that under the participants that I'm here and that I am the host. And now that I can see that, right? So without even updating this page, we can see that Josh is now a participant inside of here, right? And we can see that this updated. And then this is just a little timer. So I have this polling for every 2 seconds. So when we're ready, I'm going to go ahead and start the game. So my question is question 1. But so in a sense, what this question would be like, what is the greatest, you would answer a question, and then there's an input on your side, right, where you can go ahead and type in your response if you wouldn't mind, and then go ahead and hit submit. So I guess a better question would have been like, what is the greatest framework out there, or what programming language do you like? Right. So then now that we can see without inside of here that I don't know. So here's under one question, and then I just have one response so far. That's inside of this.
I got an exception when I submitted.
Oh, sorry, Cody.
It's all good.
That's because he's kit. He's sending UTF characters.
Yeah, stop that. I'm not doing any like this. Come on, Cody. Don't mess with me, man.
What do you mean you can't take smiley face for an answer?
Come on.
2020 emojis, all the things.
This was just a demo for me to learn, nothing else. So, right. So we can see that as people started, come in, that Josh is here, Cody's here, right? So, John D, all of this stuff just slowly started going forward. So now I'm going to say, all right, let's just go to question 2. And then, so on your guys' side, oops. Oh, I clicked it more than once. I apologize. So now that I clicked it too many times, it automatically updated on your guys', knowing that you guys are on question 3 now. Right? So then Josh is going to go ahead and enter something. And then if you guys can go ahead and enter something, right? And then do it again, right? So this is on here. So now, for me being the host, I can just come back here, right? So I can click like, oh, this one was correct. This one was wrong. This one's correct. This one was wrong. And then it's going to, go back. It's going to update this. See only 2 people.
And every time you click something, it's doing an AJAX request. Is that what's happening here?
Yes. Yeah. So every time, so on my hosting side, I'm doing polling, and there's actually polling on your guys' side as well, of actually being the game participant as well. Because you're polling every 2 seconds to see what the active question was, right? And if there's another one available for us, and so forth, right? So then we can go to question 5. I'll just go to question 5. Uh-oh. Question 5, and then we can finish the game.
Argument 1 pass. Something's going on.
Something's happening. Yeah, on John D's. So
the modal pop exception, but yeah, now I clicked away from it. Now I see game complete.
Yeah, game complete, and then you can go ahead and see your responses and how well you did and so forth. So this is
nice.
This is just this is something I hacked together in 2 days a long time ago. I wanted to I was thinking about polishing up and possibly doing something at the beginning of the overall, before the beginning of the pandemic, to kind of have some stuff with some friends, but this was just an example of it. But you can see that how all of this information was being able to dynamically update, right, without having to update any type of pages. And all of this was powered by PHP. So to me, I'm going to close this ngrok section for us. And let me go ahead.
Just to clarify, that's Livewire and Laravel, right? That's it?
Yes. Yeah.
Built that way? Are you open sourcing that?
Technically, that was Livewire version 1. I haven't updated it to version 2. I haven't considered. I mean, sure, why not? I don't have anything.
I can see it being for some people trying to learn. If a lot of stuff hasn't changed in Livewire too.
Yeah, it's just pretty much new functionality that's going to be coming out. I was just gonna kind of go through this application real quick, if you guys are okay with that. Actually, you know what? I'm hitting up on the hour, so that was an example of essentially Livewire. I can show you some of the things in here if you guys would like, but I do know that I'm coming up on that hour mark.
No, yeah. If you want to open source that would be really cool. We could, if you want to post that in the Meetup notes and stuff like that. I could see that being useful for people trying to learn Livewire. So it looks like you've kind of used a lot of different things in it, modals and the polling, and yeah, that's a pretty cool example, man.
Thank you. All right, yeah, I don't have a problem doing that. I can do that for you guys. So,
unless you want to turn it into the next $1 million company, I mean, the Devin question.
Yeah, right.
I've played stuff like this before. There are some out there, so it's a good idea.
Right, and that's the hardest thing, right? It's like we need a project or we need something in order to to learn these new tools, right? We can't just I want to go pick up this framework, right? I mean, we have to build a purpose. So that was it.
Yeah. Good stuff.
All right. Any questions about that from anyone? Cool. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Here to post the slides as well. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I can do that.
Thank you. I'm
Yeah,
the
you're
one that requested that talk, and that was awesome. Now, like you said, I just need to find a project that I could squeeze that into.
Well, what was funny was I was about to build a podcasting app in Livewire, but that didn't work out.
Oh, nice. Okay. Let's kick off the WordPress EasyEngine talk here. Alrighty. Can everybody see my screen here? The WP site management?
Yep.
Okay. Cool.
Yes.
All right. So let's kick it off then. So this talk was kind of inspired by wanting to show how I manage multiple WordPress sites for my clients. I know that there's a lot of paid SaaS services out there that cost quite a bit. I've used WP Engine and a lot of other WordPress hosting tools out there, and ever since I was told about EasyEngine, I kind of haven't really found a good, open source replacement for this. There are some others that are coming up, but as far as how easy it is to work with, how overall the management side of it works with EasyEngine for the sites, I haven't found a better tool. But as icing on the cake, I also have built an open source Terraform recipe for spinning up a server on Google Cloud Compute, which is similar to AWS, and it will create a database and a server, and you'll be able to basically, run WordPress just like the big boys do. So let's go ahead and kick it off. And at the end here, we'll dive into a demo. So my name's Joshua Copeland. I've been programming for quite some time, and most of that time has been in PHP. And the CTO of Remote Dev Force, a company I started about 4 years ago, where we service clients in many different industries, doing freelance development for them. I'm the user group leader here at PHP Vegas, also for quite some time. Looking to keep this going for a long time too, just to spread the knowledge of PHP and celebrate awesome people like Devin that, help spread their knowledge, and keep the pay it forward model going as far as what we learn. I'm also building a startup called shouthouse.com. It's in the real estate industry. That's always stop and go, but definitely something this year I want to keep chugging on. And I am a loving father and husband. There's my 2 kids and my beautiful wife. I'm a decent skateboarder, and I've been messing around in jiu-jitsu a little bit, get my butt whooped mainly. And, I've also been kind of collecting shoes and vintage and things like that anytime I get the opportunity to, aka whenever my wife lets me. So, why EasyEngine? Well, if you do what you are interested in, then at least one person is pleased, right? Again, this is just how I have come to manage WordPress sites for my clients. It's not the only way. But before EasyEngine, how I used to do this was the old way, which is basically installing and managing configurations, with Apache or Nginx, some web server essentially, and having to go buy a SSL certificate, install that, and then go through that loop every year or two, having to update SSL certificates, or one day getting a phone call from the client, hey, my cert expired and nobody can do anything on my site, which is really embarrassing. Dealing with basically how to configure PHP, whether you're hand building, FPM configs, or dealing with Apache module, it's a pain. And again, if you update something, all of it breaks, it's painful, especially when it's kind of all one shared server. When one site goes down, you have the potential to take down a whole bunch of other sites. So updating server software and packages, it's just a constant thing that you need to pay attention to. So with Apache and Nginx and, PHP, FPM, all these things, you end up having to write configs for, each site, and that turns into more configs for another site, and things become so unmanageable to the point to where, you need to look for something easier. No pun intended. That's where it doesn't need to be too hard, and there is a better way. It's called EasyEngine. So this is kind of a little diagram of how EasyEngine works. Essentially, you have a server here that you will install Docker on. And Docker then runs a main Nginx proxy that will take in all the requests that come to your server. So you'll essentially just point your domain name at the IP address of the server, and all the requests coming into 80 or 443 go through that main Nginx proxy. And then if it matches any of the domains that you set up with WordPress, it will pass it to its own individual container dedicated for that WordPress site. So when you're upgrading one site's, packages and things like that, you're not taking down the rest, or all individual Docker containers running. But, Docker is hard. If you're new to it, it can be, a learning curve there. So with EasyEngine, they abstract a lot of that away with their easy to use CLI command. So you really don't need to be a Docker expert by any means in order to use EasyEngine. It just simply uses that technology to create those segmented spaces for each of your WordPress sites. So as I mentioned, it utilizes the power of Docker, which is great. Now you can create multiple WordPress sites on a single machine without having to worry about taking out other sites in the process as they run, in a very separated way. And, what's great about it is this will come with Nginx, which is my flavor of choice for web server, and also PHP FPM, which is by far faster than the Apache module and old school way of CGI in the past of PHP. Also, if you do not want to set up a separate MySQL database, it will create a container that's running MySQL. So each site will have their own container running MySQL, as well as Redis for caching. So object caching, page caching, things like that. Again, you can set it up to have them all share one container for that, or you can have it, I think, which is by default, having them just kind of create their own containers for your database and your cache. It has built-in HTTPS, which is one of the best features. That Let's Encrypt has been a great thing that's come out. There should be no reason you should be running an HTTP production site with Let's Encrypt offering free SSL certs. So utilizing their easy-to-use kind of Acme CLI, it all kind of comes built into EasyEngine and just kind of works out of the box. It's quite nice in the way that it works with that. Object and full page caching support all comes with Redis. Again, like I mentioned, you can have that separate or sharing a Redis cache. And updating your sites is automatic. It will update WordPress core and all that if you set it up right. And updating the packages inside of the containers as well, so you never have to worry about updating your server software all the time, and kind of handles some of that for you. And the certificate renewal process as well is very easy with Let's Encrypt, as you can just simply request a new certificate or install cron to do that for you. So you don't need to be a Docker expert. Like I said, they've abstracted a lot of that away, and we'll get into that here in a second. So some of the other developer-friendly tools that come with EasyEngine are features like MailHog, which allows you to intercept email, so you don't actually need to set up like a whole SMTP thing on each one of them. You could actually just have them, if one of your WordPress sites sends an email, it can get just sent to this MailHog thing, and you can like see what it would have sent essentially there. That's more for developer uses. You can use EasyEngine locally. It's available through Brew, apt-get, all that kind of stuff. So it's very easy to install. And like I mentioned, you can install it through Brew. There's Mac support. I don't think that there's Windows support out of the box. You can probably use the Linux subshell system to install it if you really want. But yeah, I do know it works with Linux and Mac very well. There's ways to extend it using composer packages. I haven't had the need to do that, but that is there for you. It is using the MIT license. It's all open source. It's been around for quite some time. So it's been fairly well tested, and we'll dive into its CLI here in a second. But within each container, you do have the power of WP CLI, which allows you to do some really nifty things with your WordPress sites via the Bash terminal. And there are also some other great admin tools like PHPMyAdmin, Redis, web viewer, so you can see what Redis is doing. You can look at your database tables and stuff with PHPMyAdmin, and there's a few other admin tools as well that it comes with. So some kind of nifty things. Like I said, EasyEngine's one of the best I've used, but I have read about others. Probably the most likely contester out there is WordOps. I've seen it is based off of EasyEngine version 3. It was forked from that. I hear good things about it. And the others I think are probably not as developed as much, but have their own purpose. If you do want to set up like a virtual private server, I hear a Slick Stack is good. And then if you want to set up a LAMP stack for your WordPress sites, Webinoli was another one I saw, but I haven't heard too much about that one, so I'm not totally sure where that one stands. So, using EasyEngine, like I said, they have a pretty nifty little CLI here that exposes a lot of different commands that you can use to manage your WordPress sites. So we'll kind of go through them. There's the log command, and that will just show you all the different outputs that are happening. So you can see web server logs, exceptions, things like that, or perhaps are being thrown or whatever. Just gives you kind of a clean way to look at the logs that are happening, as well as if you're doing operations, something bad happens, could give you some more information. I haven't had anything go wrong with me using EasyEngine, except me running out of disk space on a server. And I'll tell you, with anything, if you run out of disk space on a server, you're done. Like, it doesn't matter if it's whatever it's using. So that was my fault. That was not EasyEngine's fault. So anyway, you can also manage services inside of EasyEngine. Like I mentioned, you can have like a centralized Redis or MySQL database. So you can like restart those services using that service command. There's also the site command. There's some additional subcommands underneath site, but essentially you can do things like site restart, which will restart the containers for your site. And some other nifty little commands like renewing your certs and things like that. There's the shell that'll bring up the WP CLI, so then you can just start running WP CLI commands from there. There's Mailhog, like I mentioned, your typical help that'll bring up a man page for EasyEngine. There's the cron. cron allows you to create cron jobs for your sites if you need those. There's also a global EasyEngine config that you can manage. I haven't had the need to do that. All the defaults have been fine for me, but that's there for you if you do need to tweak something. You can kind of see all of the info and see if there's updates needed and things like that by running the CLI command. If you do just run the command, I think it does check if it's been updated recently and will auto update if you haven't. Relatively painless, or it asks you, I believe. There's also the configure HTTP auth. So, like if you want to set up HTTP basic authentication, you can use the auth. That is really helpful if you're like building a site for a client and you don't want it like publicly exposed yet. You just want them to view it, sort of thing. You just use that really easy way to create HTTP basic authentication, username and password sort of thing to access a site. There's also the admin tools, like I mentioned, which you just need to use the admin tools command to do. So these are the two ways you can install EasyEngine. You just use the little script that they give you. These are all available on the README of their GitHub, or you can just use Brew if you want to install it on your Mac. But this top one here, the Linux one, is what I'm using to install it on the Google server, essentially. This is how you'll create a site. Very basic example here. You just do, sudo site create example.com, whatever your domain name is. You'll put in, the type, which is, this is a WordPress site. So we just put type WP, which is by default. You really don't need to pass that. But I put that there because you can pass equals PHP. And it will not install WordPress. It will just create a PHP-based template sort of thing container, with 7.4, probably 8 here pretty soon. So you can run Symfony, Laravel, whatever other PHP project you may have. They also have just straight HTTP or HTML. So if you do have like a base HTML site, you're not just restricted to creating WordPress sites. You can create different types of sites. Here are some other examples of using that EE create command. So if you do --SSL LE, LE stands for let's encrypt. That will then assume that you want HTTPS installed. If you pass the wildcard argument, that means, hey, let's put star dot whatever. So you can create like a wildcard domain. Certificate for your domain. You can also create a self-sign cert by doing the self instead of LE. If you're doing like development, you really want to get HTTPS set up.
Is Josh disconnected or did I get disconnected?
I do.
I
believe
think
it is
Josh did.
Josh.
I thought I got disconnected too.
Actually, this thing looks pretty cool.
Are you guys seeing it or?
I hear you now.
We lost your
Okay.
voice for a bit.
We lost you for a minute there, Josh.
Oh, okay. All right. Where did you lose me?
About a minute ago.
Yeah, the slide with the PHP logo. That one.
Okay. Alrighty. Sorry about that. I don't know. My internet's been kind of weird lately. Okay. So like I was mentioning on this slide, I like to set up a proper MySQL instance when I create my WordPress sites for my clients. I've done load testing on it using the MySQL container, like in Docker, versus it using a remote MySQL instance. And the remote MySQL instance is faster because it's a proper MySQL instance. It's not running inside of a container in the server that's also running a whole bunch of other sites that you're running. So it's a little quicker, but for development reasons, you don't obviously need to do that. But that's something here during the demo. I'll kind of explain how that works. So I'll kind of skip some of the other ones. Those really aren't too useful. There are multi-site features as well. WordPress has like a multi-site thing. I don't use it that much unless there's like a really specific client need. Maybe I would use it. But yeah, you can also use the --mu to specify multi-user or a multi-site and create a multi-site. There's also like some other commands that you can use to install a bunch of base plugins and things like that. I think it's called --VIP, which is like a subset of plugins that WordPress, this like group of people, I think it's like WP VIP or something, but they've got a bunch of plugins that come pre-installed that kind of help just launch stuff. But I've got my own plugins I kind of install all the time when I set up new sites.
Does it have to be Dockerized? If you're running SQL outside of the doc, Can you run the whole program outside of Docker, or is it always in Docker?
Really, I think Redis and MySQL are the only things that you can specify to run outside of the containers.
Okay.
So they will always run in their own containers as far as the web server and PHP FPM. Those will be the things that are always containerized with EasyEngine. If you do, again, want to run that outside of Docker and not have Docker in the equation at all, that's where I'd probably take a look at if there are playbooks written in the thing is spacing the name of it, but Cody, do you know that? Remember the name of the? It's not Chef. It's starts with the A, I think. Can't believe I'm forgetting it.
Ansible.
Ansible, yeah, that guy. Yeah, there's probably some WordPress Ansible playbooks you could use to install Nginx and PHP FPM and run it that way. But you're gonna get back into the nightmare of having to kind of run all of those configs and stuff to manage all of that for each site and hand doing the Let's Encrypt stuff. So I would by far recommend doing it this way unless there was like a really good reason.
So you definitely would want to run this within Docker. You wouldn't even try to run this outside of Docker.
No, I wouldn't.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I used to run it outside of Docker, like I said, but ever since I kind of been playing or using this in production, I don't think I'd go back to that just because of the amount of maintenance that's required versus doing it this way. And when it comes down to it, Docker really is just like an abstraction layer. When you can SSH, for lack of a better word, into a container, and it's kind of like you're still in a normal server. The differences to me aren't big enough to justify having to run it all in one server. I thought about like if there's like a slight like performance hit for running all of this in Docker, but I haven't seen any. So let's see. So yeah, I think this is just more the same. You can create like multi-alias domains. So if you want to point multiple domains at one site using like the multi-site thing, you can pass in this -- alias domains. You can provide your own SSL certificate if you don't want to use Let's Encrypt. Here are some easy to use kind of cache clearing commands. So you can just clear the whole site by running site clean, then the domain name, and that'll clear all of the cache. Or you can specifically just clear the object, page, or proxy cache by running one of those other arguments there. You can run the WP CLI, like I mentioned, by just running the shell command. And you can also dive into some other services or users based on some arguments you can pass in as well. And then from there, you can just run your WP CLI commands against that site as you normally would. If you do want to bounce the Nginx proxy that takes in all the incoming requests, you can do a restart. If for some reason you do hand edit the configs, you could reload them. I haven't really had the need to ever really bounce it or anything like that. So haven't really used these, but they are there for you. I have used the EE site disable and enable. There is like a site one, not just a service. So you can like suspend a site first, if you want to, just with like a simple command, and then bring it back really easy just by running the enable. This is the HTTP auth I mentioned. So if you just want to create a username password and put a website behind HTTP auth while you're developing a client site, this is super useful. You just run this EE create, EE auth create, and then EE auth delete when you're done, when you want to expose it to the world. And there are some other admin tools You can do adminier. There's PHP My Admin, which is probably the most popular, like I mentioned. You can throw up a info PHP file. There's WebGrind, Xdebug. You can get working. There's some other status sort of pages for your Redis, as well as FPM that you can see as well. You will have to enable those. So you have to just run admin tools, enable, put your domain, and then that will enable those. Like I mentioned, there's auto updates. I took this screenshot. This was while I was doing some work on one of my servers. I just ran this help command, and it's like, hey, we see you're running an old version, 4.1.4. Would you like to update to 4.1.5? I hit yes, and under a minute, it's done. I'm running the latest EasyEngine, and like I mentioned, the containers themselves kind of auto update as well. So when a new version of PHP, all that kind of stuff comes out, it's updating that stuff. That's maybe something you want to turn off if you're worried about a client site breaking that has a lot of customizations. But it is nice for a majority of your base WordPress sites that have plugins that get updated, because typically those plugins get updated before those major versions come out so they don't break. So now that was all about EasyEngine. I'm going to kind of dive into some of the open source stuff that I've done as far as using Google Cloud Compute to spin up a server and install EasyEngine. So it's inoperable. We can run this on our local Mac, or we could run this on our servers running, Ubuntu, Fedora, Debian, whatever you're running. You don't have to just run this on Google Cloud. You could run this anywhere. Just spin up a Linux server on any one of these popular hosting platforms and you're ready to go. The Terraform scripts I do have only working for Google Cloud, but it wouldn't be that hard for somebody who knows Terraform to convert that to just run an EC2 on AWS or an instance on Azure or DigitalOcean, whatnot. Terraform supports all of those as providers, so it should be relatively easy to do that. So for those who aren't familiar with Terraform, it's basically infrastructure as code. So rather than having one developer go onto your AWS account or your Google Cloud Compute account and hand clicking around in the console, create server, use this flavor of Linux, and basically only that developer knowing what he did. If another developer comes along, they have no idea what that guy did, what he used. They basically have to reverse engineer that. They have to log into the AWS account, look at the EC2, try to get into the EC2, all of that kind of stuff. Well, with Terraform, you're basically documenting how you're setting up your cloud. So there's no question about what's being created, what's set up. It's all there as code would be, in a sense. So it's a great way of not only documenting how you set up your remote, hosting environments, but also gives you a clean way to extend that if you wanted to add cache, if you wanted to, create an RC environment. You just need to copy your production, and now you've got an RC. So it makes things very easy once you get used to that. And Terraform isn't like the only way to kind of like spin up infrastructure. AWS does have CloudFormation, which is kind of the same thing, but you're really locked into AWS with CloudFormation. Whereas Terraform, you can, it's kind of agnostic to clouds. Like I mentioned, you can use them with any of those other providers that I showed you before, including AWS. So how the provision process works is step 1, you're editing your Terraform. Step 2, you're going to run plan, which plan will tell you, hey, this is what it's going to do. And then you can run apply, and apply will actually then use the APIs with either AWS or Linode or DigitalOcean, whatever you specified. It uses the APIs to say, hey, go spin all this stuff up, create all this. But what's great is the second time you run it, the state of what you did is saved. So when you run it again, it's like, hey, I've already got a server. Let's not spin that up again. So if you eventually want to add something, remove something, it's all kind of being stored in state files for you. So that way you can kind of slowly expand the way that you set up your cloud environment. So you'll want to check what it's going to do. Step 3, look at what it's going to do. We'll get that here in a second in the demo. And at the very end, run the apply, and voila, you got yourself a server and all that great stuff. I even do use Terraform to manage my DNS. So I have dozens of domain names, and I'll use Terraform to basically say, go point at this IP address. That way, if I add a new server in the future where the IP address changes, I just need to run Terraform apply, and it'll automatically go to Namecheap in my case, which is what I use for domains, and then just use its API to automatically update all my domains without me having to go through each domain and updating the IP or anything like that. So I created this repository here to kind of share this because I think it could be useful for someone out there wanting to build a similar setup. So if you go to GitHub and under OG Programmer, which is my username, you can look for EasyEngine GCP Terraform, and you'll find the example that we'll go over here right now. So in the README, by the way, underneath that repo, there's a lot of kind of like step-by-step on how you'll set this up. So we'll go through that right now. Okay. So just to kind of walk through the setup real quick. So you'll just clone this down, go and create like an account with Google. And what you'll want to do is install the gcloud CLI command. And so what that CLI command will then allow you to do is like log in to your cloud account. So if you run gcloud auth login, which I guess I could do just for sake of illustration here. It will automatically open up a window for you that basically says, log into your Google Cloud account. I've already done this, but you'll just select your, Google account that's attached to your Google Cloud system. And once you do that, a JSON file will get created. It is inside of the config. You go to your root here. .config. There's a gcloud folder in here, and if you go to legacy credentials and then your email, you'll then see there's a JSON file inside of here essentially. So here's mine right here. You'll just copy this path. So you'll copy this full path to this JSON file. Take that, because that's essentially your credentials to use the API against Google Cloud Platform. So copy that path, go over here to Terraform's main.tf file, and you'll paste in that credentials file right here. So just to kind of walk a little bit through Terraform, we're saying the provider we want to use is Google. You can lock versions and do other things like that, so things don't break on you when new versions come out. I'm using the central zone, but these are all through Terraform variables. So there's this variables TF file here. You can see a bunch of things like, if you want to create a whitelisted office and home IP, this allows you to kind of SSH from particular places. So in my case, I'll probably want to, I'll put in my IP address here. Let me grab my IP. And then you can just simply update it here. And then you also have other things like where you want to spin up the server. Google as well as AWS has like East Coast, West Coast, Central, all around the world. And you'll have different availability zones within each region. Typically, you can just stick with that. Zone A. I like Central because it's obviously in the middle of the country. So if a user's on the East Coast or West Coast, it's kind of meets middle ground for them. And then you'll need to define the project name. So when you create your Google Cloud account, you'll have basically like a project name that you can create. You can create multiple projects if you want. But essentially, it's just like a way of grouping all of the infrastructure underneath one account and a way of grouping the billing too. If you want to bill a client specifically for their own stuff or whatever, you could create different projects for each account. So let's go ahead and show you exactly how this works. So I'm going to go back over here. So I think those are really the only two things you need to change, which I do specify this in the README, is just add your credentials, and then update your project name. And that should be, aside from adding your IP address, I think those are the three things that you need to do, and you're ready to rock and roll. So I have included some examples, but I commented them out. Like if you want to use Namecheap, I know there's a GoDaddy one too, but this is like how I was saying, you can point your IP address of your server to your domain name just by uncommenting this and then hooking up your Namecheap credentials or Google, GoDaddy or whatever. And then if you do want to set up a proper database, here is a recipe that you can uncomment as well that will allow you to create a proper MySQL instance. For the sake of this demo, I'm just going to be creating a single server, and we're going to be using EasyEngine's built-in MySQL container. So like I mentioned, there's plan and apply. I've created some easy-to-use bash scripts that kind of abstract, having to basically run this. It's really not that big of a deal, but you run Terraform get and init. That just downloads all the Terraform plugins. So in our case, the Google plugin, and maybe Namecheap if we were using that. And then if we wanted to kind of see detailed things that Terraform's doing, we can comment this to really see verbose output. But the real meat and potatoes of this is this command right here, the Terraform plan, or in apply's case, Terraform apply. If you do want to destroy the environment, which we'll do at the end of the demo, we just run this Terraform destroy, and that will take what's in the state file right here, which is updated every time we run apply, and will destroy everything that's in the state file. So this is kind of dangerous. You don't want to run this unless you're really, really sure. But yeah, so that's basically how you'll spin up and spin down the environment. There's a firewall here. We say, hey, open port 80, open port 22. And here are our, IP addresses that we're whitelisting just for 22. So we're not letting anybody kind of come in and SSH to our environment. And then, like I mentioned here, the main kind of thing, there's really not much else to show except the SSH keys. This will create an admin user on the server, and it will use this SSH key right here, which is specified in variables, this IDRSA pub. So it's just going to take this public key and install that on the server when it spins it up. So if you do want to use separate keys or whatever, you can change that, but leaving that as default typically will work. And then our outputs, this basically gives us a way to export variables of showing like what the IP address of the server is, and maybe this MySQL instance, but really the main thing is just our server IP address that we really need here. And this is kind of, I think, the part that I wanted to go over, which is Terraform modules. You can kind of make Terraform extensible in a sense that allows you to use one piece of code to do, an RC and a production server, for example. So here, this tfgcp wp server folder, which is what I specified as the source, it's going to take all of the Terraform stuff in here, and all I'm doing is just passing variables into it to spin that stuff up. So all the variables that are inside of this here, I can override very easily just by changing some of those things, or it can use a default if I don't specify those. So the main kind of thing, if you look in this main TF file underneath this folder here, there's a IP address it creates. There's a image that it uses for Debian. You can specify the version. And then there's also the compute instance itself, which is basically like an EC2 server. So here we specify the name of the machine type, how big the server we want to run, whether we want to protect it from being deleted or not, how big we want the hard drive. We can tag it. This is basically used for like the firewall. So we can add different tags and those tie into this firewall here. So like, HTTPS and things like that all kind of get tied in with what we specify on these tags. And I think the last thing to note is just the metadata startup script. This bash script here is what will run when the server is first spun up. So when we run this and we run apply, when the server first spins up, it's going to take everything in this bash file right here and run this to install everything. So this bash file is pretty straightforward. It's just installing Docker, a couple of useful tools for development purposes, and EasyEngine, which we showed this command in the past, as well as like a MySQL client, which is helpful if you just want to like hop into the MySQL server and kind of like look at databases from the CLI or whatever. So let's go ahead and run this. I guess the last thing, this is the VPC too. So yeah, this is basically the network in which we're going to launch it. So let me open up the terminal here. We'll run plan first. So you can see it's fetching. First, it fetched all of the plugins for Terraform. So Google, and then like this random plugin, which is what I think I'm using for like creating a random password for the MySQL. I don't think I really need that here, but if you're using the MySQL one, you will. And then it basically then tells you each and everything that's that's going to launch in your Google Cloud Compute account. So here's the firewall, rule for HTTP, HTTPS, allowing us to ping the server, the SSH rule. There is the VPC itself it's going to create. Here's the SSH key with my public key in there. There is the actual Acme database subnetwork. There's the global app network. This is basically the applications subnet that it's going to launch in. And then there's also the IP address that it's going to create for the server, and the actual Google Cloud Compute instance itself. So this right here is basically, everything that's it's going to do for the actual server itself. And I think that's pretty much it. And here are some of the outputs it's going to push out. So run Terraform apply. So it's going to ask us like, okay, hey, I'm about to go actually do this stuff. Are you sure? And we say yes. Now it's actually running this stuff against our Google account. So let's let this run here. So you can see kind of step by step what it's doing. But yeah, essentially, sometimes it'll take a little while. I mean, it is spinning up a server and things like that, but it shouldn't take too long here. But you can also kind of, at the very end, go to your actual console and, kind of refresh here and see it doing stuff. But again, this gets rid of me having to like manually click create instance, specify all that stuff that I mentioned, and then having to like, months down the road when I want to create another server, having to remember what I did. Now I can just simply, copy, this config and I'm done. So like, for example, if I wanted to create another server, I could go here to servers TF, copy this, do my server, RC, and now I've got like a, create a different tag. We'll probably want to do like, RC 111 sort of thing. And then now next time we run apply, it would, create another server, but we won't run that yet. So.
Josh, you use this Terraform just to provision for Google. That's the purpose of it. It provisions Google servers for you.
Not just Google. You could use it for AWS.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So it basically is just a way of you documenting how you set up your servers and stuff like that. But yes, it will provision it for you. So now it told me, hey, it's done, right? So I've got an IP address of the server. And if I go over here to my Google Cloud Compute and refresh, I should see the second server here that I'm running. So there it is right there. TF Acme WP prod 1. So there's my IP address here, .50. And if I look here, that's the same as this output right here. So now we can actually just SSH over to this. And now we're on the server. Let's check if Docker was installed. There's Docker, and it looks like it also installed EasyEngine with that command I was using. So, now at this point, we can use, we can use the site create stuff to create new sites and things like that. We could also, basically from here, set up whatever else you would want on the server as well. You don't, like I said, just have to use it for WordPress. We could create like a PHP site or an HTML site, things like that. So let me try and go over here to my Namecheap account and point a domain real quick at it. Give me just 1 second.
This thing's pretty cool. I got it to work on Amazon while you were talking.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
I'm going to be using this thing. EasyEngine.
Let's see. 0716. Okay, so I'm just pointing the DNS of my website right now over to EasyEngine. So I think one more thing I want to showcase. Hang on. Okay, I've just updated that. The other thing I wanted to showcase was there are some scripts I've included. If you do plan on using EasyEngine, these scripts are going to be really helpful. They're basically scripts to allow you to create, like I mentioned, if you want to create a plain site, this script right here, it has basically like all these different arguments already ready to go for you and a lot of like output. So all you need to do is just like pass in the domain name, the subdomain name like www or whatever. And this script right here will go and create a plain site. Or if you have just a regular site or a site with a remote database, this remote database one actually is a little more complicated. It will go over to your database and create the database, the user, the password, all that kind of stuff. And then passes that all then into the create command. So it kind of just gives you one easy to use script where you just say, hey, here's my domain, here's my subdomain, and then give it like a little short name. You don't have to give it a short name. If you don't give it a short name, it just uses whatever you put for the actual domain. But essentially, what that will do is kind of, build this whole kind of EE site create command with the whole database password and all that kind of stuff pre-built for you. So let me just copy that real quick. You can upload these using this upload files script. This will actually take the output of your Terraform. It'll loop over each IP address that you've set up, and then it uses the gcloud command to SCP all the files up to your server. We're running short on time, so I can't show all of this stuff off, but definitely just kind of like go through, because there's like some backup scripts in here, how you can back up your databases, how you can back up EasyEngine, how to do exports of your database, some helpful things for like WordPress. So a lot of little tools that I've used over the course of a couple of years here of using EasyEngine on a server that might make your life easier to manage production sites and things like that. So now that I've pointed the IP address of like a domain name that I owned, let's go ahead. I'm gonna just create that site, but let me just kind of clean up because I think I had a site on here previously. So create some out what probably sudo www. So that's going to revoke the certificate and all that. I'm going to just recreate the site so we have a fresh certificate and just kind of show how that works. So EE site, if we just run this, EE site, this will kind of give us all the different commands that you can do. So you can explore all the different kind of commands that are out there. This is like the way that you can update sites if you don't want to let it auto update or whatever. But let's run EE site create www soldoutbot.com, and then we won't pass in anything special here. We'll just run the simple command to have it go spin up the Nginx container, the PHP container. There's the postfix container, which I believe is for like email, and then the Redis container for your cache, and MariaDB, which is basically MySQL. That's running your database. This is kind of like the main Nginx proxy here. So all of the requests that are coming in, you can see this one's special in the sense that it's actually taking a hold of port 80 and 443. So all of the requests coming into those ports are going through this Nginx proxy first. And that's where it's using the power of EasyEngine to go, okay, how can I route this request? So if it sees a domain name that you have set up, then it routes it to the particular stuff that you have set up for that site. And then there's also like a cron container as well. So now I've created the site. I can just kind of navigate here, and I've got the site up here. Actually, let me do that again. I think I have to pass in WP type. I ran that and it worked, but it's an HTML site. So I guess you do actually have to pass in type. Do that again. Type equal WP. I probably have that actually in this EE create. Yeah, there, type WP cache, because you can, if you don't pass this in, I don't think it actually like will have a cache for you. And then you can also specify like your own logins and stuff, but it will create some for you if you don't specify this. And then this LE mail is what you're going to use for your ad. You know, basically when a certificate's about to expire, it'll email you here. But to kind of just wrap up this demo, let me run this real quick. So it's downloading the latest WordPress. It created a WP config for us. It's going to spit out all the WP credentials here in a second. So it's done. So here's our site. If I wanted HTTPS, I could have just passed in --SSL-LE. I should have done that, but whatever. And then, you know, it gives us where the root is, the domain. Here's my WordPress username and password. Please don't hack me right now, guys. You know, the the WP or the database credentials, which could be useful if you want to access the database directly. So now let me go ahead and come back here. I'll refresh the site. Boom, here's a WordPress site. So if I just go to WP admin and I copy the username and password, which is why I like defining my own, because it kind of just uses random stuff, and yeah, it's never easy to remember.